Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend. I'm Jason Godbey, and today on the program, we got some more movie reviews for you and some streaming series recommendations. Once again, joining me from across the land, our man in Hollywood and the man behind actuallypaid.com, Mr. Bill Hammon. Welcome back, Bill.
Yep, yep.
I know it feels like we just did this, but we did so much film festival coverage with Tribeca and everything. We didn't get to talk about a lot of movies that are actually in theaters. So, and that, like normies can see who aren't like going to film festivals or, are critics. We got
Flee
some,
before me, plebeians.
so we got some good stuff to talk about. I want to make some streaming recommendations. You got a couple of movies to talk about. What's our first item up for bid?
The latest from Yorgos Lanthimos, Kinds of Kindness. It was kind of surprising when this was announced because he was just coming off of Poor Things. Emma Stone won her second Oscar. They won all these artistic Oscars. To have another film come out basically 6-7 months later, kind of a shock. But in a weird way, this is one of his most unique works. But it's also his core elements laid bare. A lot of sexual and ribald humor, a lot of dark humor, a lot of stilted line readings and dialogue to kind of show this very extreme satirical view of how we contort ourselves into what is considered a normal life. This time presented as a triptych, three separate stories that only have the connection of a background character just referred to as RMF. Otherwise, you have basically a small ensemble of actors: Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, Willem Dafoe, Hong Chow, Margaret Qualley, Mamadou Ati. Very small group of people playing a different role in each segment. The way it works out is basically each of the three areas show an exaggerated view of different stages of life. The first one, called The Death of RMF, is mostly about Jesse Plemons as a successful businessman living an ideal life, but literally every aspect of his life, from the food he eats to the hours he works to the times he has relations with his wife, are planned down to the millisecond by Willem Dafoe playing his boss. So in a weird way, it's more of a parent-child dynamic, because the one time Plemons' character says, "I'm not going to do this thing," which is kill RMF, he loses everything. He's completely cut off. Every perk and advantage he had in his life is now gone. The whole facade is ripped out from under his feet until he comes crawling back to daddy. Then you have the second segment, RMF is Flying, where where Jesse Plemons plays a cop whose wife, Emma Stone, is a marine biologist lost at sea. And he's trying to mourn her potential death and cope. And then she shows back up, but he's convinced that she's not real, that she's an imposter because her shoes don't fit the same way, or she eats chocolate even though his wife hates chocolate. And he goes to these very dark and very extreme lengths to basically harm himself and also make her harm herself to prove that she loves him and that she's really his wife. It's very disturbing, but again, encapsulating one section of our life cycle. It's the idea of adult relationships, whether they're abusive or loving, and how we cope with that interpersonal dynamic when we're basically equals, but one side doesn't think they're an equal. And then finally, the third part, RMF eats a sandwich, which that if there's one flaw in the film, it's the pacing, because I was just waiting for RMF to eat the sandwich so we could end the film and go home. Stone and Plemons are members of a sex cult run by Dafoe and Hong Chow, and they're looking for a woman who's prophesied to be able to resurrect the dead. Margaret Qualley playing a set of twins in this series. And of course, this one is more about how we cope with the inevitability of death, how we transition into the final stages of life, that sort of thing. Jesse Plemons, I believe he won Best Actor at Cannes for his 3 stellar performances, nomination worthy. Certainly, I hope to hear his name called in January by the Academy. He certainly deserves it. Emma Stone, of course, was great as always. Margaret Qualley, a lot of fun, and of course, Defoe is again pure Defoe. The fact that so much is done with so little, again, this is kind of a trademark of Lanthimos. This whole film very much highlights his tropes and defaults, for lack of a better term. But it's also the hardest to follow because again, once you realize that this random background character is the only connecting thread, you do wonder, like, where was he flying? Did I miss that part? When's he going to eat the sandwich? Does he die? Like, it definitely leads to some pacing issues, and it could also lead to some like really confusing side bits, like Emma Stone randomly dancing to some some trance music, or dogs driving cars to the tune of Rainbow in the Dark. Like there's some moments that are just decidedly odd, and because we're doing this in 3 short stories rather than an overarching narrative, it can be confusing at times, but it is still highly creative, and it bathes in its own irony. I mean, the movie's called Kinds of Kindness, and really the only kindness being shown is cruelty as a form of, welcome to the real world kind of thing. I enjoyed it, but if you're not a Lanthimos fan, you are just going to wonder what the heck's going on. And even then, I would say this is probably the least of his English language films. Still a solid B plus for me, but I can definitely see where people would just stare at this and go, what am I supposed to do?
I have that reaction to a lot of his films. Not that I think they're bad, I just don't know if they're for me. And I think he's one of those acquired taste filmmakers that you either get or don't.
I liken him to a Wes Anderson, where it can be hit and miss, and he's got his own distinct style, only he's much more, graphic and dark in a lot of areas while Anderson is more quirky and light. But again, if you're not into it, if you don't acquire the taste, it's just going to fall completely flat for you.
I have a couple of series recommendations. They're both I'll talk about both of them. They're both comic book properties. One is on Netflix, the other one's on Amazon. The first one I want to talk about is the last season of Umbrella Academy season 4. The premise is that you have these siblings all born on the same day randomly to women who were not previously pregnant, and they all grow up with these special powers. They're adopted by this character called Hargreaves, who's played by Colm Fiore. The cast is really, really strong, led by Elliot Page. I actually spoke to Elliot Page about this on the red carpet of Newfest when we caught up with him earlier this year. I asked if he could give me any details. He said, quote, "I would be done for." So that was a big no, but I was dying to see it because I was a fan. I think I was actually wearing my Umbrella Academy t-shirt when I spoke to him. What I will say about the final season, I don't want to give it away, especially if you haven't watched it. I think it's a fitting end. I think people had problems with it. There was a lot of Reddit chatter about it, but I feel like it's a fitting end to the series because it's about these people. They're from season 1. They're trying to stop the apocalypse, but the apocalypse keeps following them around, and we finally find out why. Which I thought was an interesting answer. I don't know if it's the answer that everybody wanted. I don't even know if it's the answer that I wanted, but it was an interesting answer and an entertaining one. And all the characters are really entertaining. They're all very eccentric. Colm Fiore, as Hargreaves, I think he's a very underrated actor. He's a wonderful actor. There were a couple of character choices I wasn't crazy about. 2 of the older siblings, Luther and Diego, where they play they're all numbered number 1 through 7, and they're number 1 and 2. And they finally come together in this movie after being at odds for the most part. But they kind of made them really dumb for some reason, and I didn't understand that. Also, one thing that was frustrating about the series as a whole was there is this classic trope of people just not telling people where they're going to be or what they're going to do or what the plan is, and therefore screwing up the other people. So that's kind of frustrating. One thing I noticed is that it's a very alternate timeline, because in this timeline there are no smartphones. So nobody's like texting anybody to say, hey, I'll be right back. Hey, me and such character are going to go on this side quest, but we'll come back later. So there's none of that happens. And unfortunately, bad things come about because of it. All in all, I thought it was really well done. If you are a fan of the series and you're just trying to decide whether or not you want to watch the ending, definitely recommend it. The other series that I will talk about, this is an animated series, Batman the Caped Crusader, currently streaming on Amazon. Now, Bill, were you a fan of Batman the animated series?
It's one of my favorite shows of all time. And I hear Bruce Timm is involved in this.
He's the EP on this, and it's hard for someone like myself to even judge this one fairly, because if you love the animated series, then you can't help but compare it. I wrote a review of the first couple of episodes, and it was like so hard to not compare it and just see it as its own thing. You know, because it's 30 years later. It's not the same show. For one thing, the animated series had this very kind of anachronistic sort of setting. You could not tell when they were, because they had some advanced technology stuff, but they watched black and white television. Everything kind of looked, the cars looked like 40s-esque, but then there were these gadgets. And it was really, really interesting. This one looks a little bit more firmly planted in like the 1940s, which is where, Batman comes from. Batman's a character from 1939. I feel like all the character relationships, they reimagine like a lot of the Rogues Gallery. Harley Quinn is a very different character here. The Penguin is played by Minnie Driver in a gender-swapped version of the character called Oswalda Cobblepot, I think the name is. And she gives this very sort of Marlena Dietrich-esque kind of performance when her character is introduced, which is kind of interesting. Hamish Linklater, he does a great job, but nobody's Kevin Conroy. And in this first season anyway, they did not bother to put the Joker in. So that kind of shows you how great Mark Hamill was, because it's like we're not even going to touch that performance. So overall with that show, I think it's only about 8 episodes, or 8 or 10 episodes. It's really well done. The animation is very good. It's not as good as the original series because it's by and large not the old-fashioned cell hand-drawn animation. There's a lot of computer animation in it, but it works. It's got this very like sort of black and white, very, very steeped in film noir kind of color palette and lighting and so forth. But all in all, I liked it. I feel like I want to see more of it if they come out with a season 2. But I would say the only bad news is it's not the animated series. It's not as good as the original, but nothing is going to be. The good news is that it's pretty damn good. If you like the animated series and you want another animated Batman series with that sort of style and quality, this is the best we're going to get.
I'm very intrigued by it. I haven't gotten the chance to see it yet, but yeah, the animated series was easily one of my favorite shows of all time. And as a byproduct of that, I fell for Harley so hard when I was a kid. Arlene Sorkin's voice, God rest her soul, everything about her. Like, I used to fantasize about being the Joker, but I would be good to her. It's like, I'd be the Joker she deserves, not the one she got. So she's a character that I've loved watch evolve over the years because she was created for the original show. Her backstory, her origins were basically being written in real time. It's also why I love the Harley Quinn show on HBO, and now with spin-off Kite Man, hell yeah, which is a lot of fun as well. Because again, Kite Man is a very, very like D-list villain in the DC universe. They bring him in for this show just as a gag. He turns into a beloved character. Now he's got his own show. Like it in essence, Harley spun off her own Harley. When you tell me Bruce Timm's gonna be behind, is like, I have to at least give the benefit of the doubt a little bit. I want to see what they do with Harley. In any other random hands, the idea of a gender swap of the Penguin is just dead on arrival. But you tell me Minnie Driver's voicing it, Bruce Timm signed off on it, okay. It may not work, but I'm willing to give it a shot. So, yeah, like this is... I guess my one question is, if you're going to make a direct comparison, is this the X-Men 97 of Batman?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't gotten so much into X-Men 97, but I would say it's in the same spirit, but it's not a continuation at all. It's a very different show.
A spiritual successor rather than being a direct successor.
That's exactly how I would say it. It's a spiritual successor to the animated series, and it's probably, without the original voice cast, it's the best we're going to get. It's still good. It's still really good, and really what got me about it was seeing what they were going to do with these characters, because it's unexpected and different, and therefore, because I've seen all the episodes of the animated series. I know those characters. This reintroduces them in a fun and interesting way, and I'm totally down for it. I'll definitely, if we get a season 2, I'll definitely watch it. All right, we probably got one time for like one more movie. What do you got for us?
A rarity for me. I'm making a streaming recommendation here. This is a film that's on Netflix right now. You can watch it whenever you want. It's called The Imaginary. And I have to emphasize The Imaginary, not Imaginary. That's a completely different film that came out earlier this year. A really bad horror movie about a demonic teddy bear that borrows a lot from Beetlejuice and doesn't acknowledge it. This is an anime film from Japan, directed by Yoshiyuki Momose, who is, for animation fans, he is a veteran of Studio Ghibli. He's worked on the likes of Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Porco Rosso, like all those films. So his bona fides are well in order. This is a film about imaginary friends, which we've also had this year in the form of If, directed by John Krasinski and starring Ryan Reynolds. The big difference here between The Imaginary and If is that The Imaginary has more imagination in the first 2 minutes than either film has in their entire runtime. Basically, it's set in London. It's based on a children's book. You have this young girl named Amanda who has an imaginary friend named Rudger. That's R-U-D-G, not Roger, Rudger. You find out pretty quickly why Rudger exists. But the film introduces him by saying, like, I'm an imaginary. I live in this world that is completely created by Amanda's mind, and you see it come to life on the screen, where the possibilities are endless and the sky is the limit as far as what you can come up with for their little adventures in the attic. The danger comes in the form of our villain named Mr. Bunting, who is voiced by Jeremy Swift in the English dub. You have a strong English voice cast, including Haley Atwell and Cal Penn, Roger Craig Smith. Really good English cast. Mr. Bunting is an unnaturally old man who eats imaginaries to stay alive. Like devours them like Pennywise. Amanda and Rudger basically live by 3 rules. No matter what they do, 3 rules. No disappearing, keep each other safe, no crying. I guarantee you, rule 3 will be violated often while you're sitting there. You are going to get the feels a lot in this film. There's a tragic accident, and it looks like Rudger is about to disappear, because when an imaginary is forgotten, they fade from existence entirely. He's then saved by a cat named Jinzan, that's Cal Penn, who leads him to a library where all these imaginaries who no longer have their kids live, and in essence work as day players for other kids' imaginations, which is a great concept. It's like, oh, this kid wants to have a space adventure, but he only has a stuffed tiger. He needs a whole crew. Let's all go into his brain and help him. Like, that is so creative. And it reinforces this really great idea that it takes place in a library. Amanda and her mother own a bookstore. Reading can set your mind ablaze, can get the creative juices flowing like nothing other. Hell, there's a pivotal character in this film. I won't explain what he does or why, but in the English version, he's voiced by LeVar Burton. Take a look. It's in the friggin' book. That is a great message to send to children. And when you aid it with this gorgeously vibrant animation, again, from someone who cut his teeth in Studio Ghibli, this shocker of a film that got buried on Netflix, whereas, Discount Grimace and Deadpool are cavorting with Phoebe Waller-Honeybee Bridge. It's the best film I've seen this year. This has been an off year for movies. Let's just call it what it is. We're getting into award season, and there's only a handful of films that might be nominated next year at the Oscars for more than one category. I don't want this film to be forgotten. I don't want this to disappear. Because when you get inundated by the marketing of a film like If or a throwaway B horror movie like Imaginary, this gets lost in the shuffle, and it's a gem. It's a diamond. You need to see this just to get lost in the moment. It's like, because one of the weird things for me, I don't recall ever having an imaginary friend as a kid. It just wasn't part of my psyche. I talked to myself and I lost myself in video games, but I don't think I ever had an imaginary friend. What I did have was my mother would tell me and my sister stories that she would just make up off the top of her head about characters that were clearly us, just with different names, and they were like, they were very like sugary names, like Sweetie Pie and Honey Child or something like that. Like very, I don't remember the exact names. It's been too long, but it was just, you know, this idea that you can just create something out of whole cloth to get a kid's eyes wide and just looking at the world around them and thinking of their own possibilities for everything in this wonderful existence that we have, mundane though it may be at times. You can't lose sight of that kind of stuff. And this is a film that truly reinforces that, again, as anime is often wont to do, by giving the kids a degree of intellectual credit and knowing that they can handle heavier themes like death and loss in non-contrived ways. You know, allow the kids to be smart enough and ask the questions that parents may not even be prepared to answer, but the kids need to know. That shows a remarkable degree of maturity. And when you have that kind of stuff, you really can't let it go. And so, yeah, like my Netflix queue has been backed up for a long time, but I carved out a night to just watch this film and just let myself be dazzled, and I'm glad I did.
It sounds good, man. I want to check it out. I'm not the biggest anime person. I like animation, but for some reason anime has often eluded me. I've seen some of the classic animes out there. I don't know if I've ever understood them so much.
I think that's kind of the point. Like, it's not supposed to be wholly understood. And not in a way where you're just glossing over plot holes. It's meant to stimulate your senses and get you to ask questions of yourself, of what you're watching. Maybe watch it again to try to see if you've noticed something you didn't before. I mean, my all-time favorite animated film is Princess Mononoke. I've watched it dozens of times. I still see something new every time I watch it. I watched it just last month for the umpteenth time. Every single time I watch it, there's something new to discover with it. And that's something that Studio Ghibli and anime in general just do so well, that Western animation sometimes gets to, especially with Pixar, but doesn't often approach, mostly because it's just not profitable. It's not marketable. But the quality, I mean, if every Western and American animated film were like anime films, we would be getting 5 or 6 Spider-Verses a year instead of one every 5. So that's my quality endorsement.
All right, man, I got to wrap up. Once again, for people who want to check out your reviews and see more of you, where can they find you online?
All right, the blog is actuallypaid.com. We also repurpose on Medium, so you can find me there. Twitter and or X and or Tesla Light or whatever the hell we're gonna call it next month is actually_paid, which is also the handle for the YouTube channel. I actually paid to see this. I just put up a lovely little takedown of the Megalopolis trailer that's gotten some good reactions. So we'll see what happens with that. And I will watch Megalopolis just out of morbid curiosity. I don't just make fun of stuff to make fun of stuff. I do put my money where my mouth is most of the time. So yeah, any of those sites, you can find me there. And of course, you can find me right here on the BTRP Media Network.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks so much, man. This was fun. I'm definitely going to check out that film. And thank you all out there for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more of our content, including more movie reviews, visit our website, NoRestForTheWeekendPodcast.com. You can find us on all your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube, youtube.com/GetBehindTheRabbit. I'd like to thank Bill Hammon. And for Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This is the BTRP Media Network.